Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. I'm your host, Nino Gonzalez, joined by my co-host, Chen. Hey, how's it going?
Good morning. Good morning. How are
Good
you?
morning. I'm doing good. We have stable power, stable internet. So it seems things seem to be going back to normal, if you will, after our last episode. I mean, we talked about the aftermath of the hurricane. We discussed a little bit just on prioritizing what we feel is important to us and kind of making us take a step back and realize, all right, big picture, what really matters and what do we want to focus on and such. So how about yourself? How are you?
Doing great. And I try to, I'm a glass half full personality. And so I try
That
to
you are.
start my day with something positive. So I'm not very regimented where I, wake up and say 10 good things about myself. No, that's not how I do it. But I get up and I have my routine where, I kind of, luckily now I have a house that has a water view. So that really helps.
Yeah.
I love being on the water. I love that, they call it the blue state of mind. Just a little, even if it's just like, you sit there quietly. I like to drink my tea or coffee, just kind of look out and kind of not really focus on anything, but just more focusing on how like this is God like giving me a day
Mhm.
to appreciate it. So in all the turbulence of the day, that piece to begin with helps me a lot.
Mhm.
So yeah, like we've gone through some rough times in the last few weeks, and so it's just really good to have that moment. I like to get up before everybody,
No,
which
yeah.
is
No, and
not
that's
hard
that's
to
what
do
I
in my household.
yeah, true. No, and that's what we wanted to talk about today. I know we've discussed on previous episodes the role of essentially staying sane and understanding that there's highs and there's lows, and how we talk about being resilient. We tell people about understanding the importance of setting goals and having longer term visions, short term goals. But a lot of that's on the bigger level when we talk about the minute to minute, the day to day, hour to hour, when we're in our own brains and when we're in our own minds. I think that's where the mental health piece comes in. And you mentioned yourself right now, something that you like to do, just wake up and, look over the water and drink your coffee, drink your tea, and kind of take it all in. And some would take that as a meditative state. Others would just say you're just kind of waking up and doing your own thing. So we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about maybe some of our habits, our routines of what we do, whether there's chaos going on or whether it's a very good day. No matter what, we have our things that we like to do that we tend to fall back on, that bring us joy, that bring us peace, and that helps us to stay resilient and keeps things stable, if you will. I think that this is probably one of the I know we have multiple areas that you and I both align very heavily. I think this is one of those areas. There are a few. I think this is one of those areas where you and I differ. And I want to kind of caveat that with, we talked about the difference between becoming a maximizer and a satisfier, trying to maximize and be the most productive and get everything that you can out of something, versus a satisfier who says, I'm satisfied with enough. I don't need to worry about, okay, well, I want to optimize even more. I'm good with where I have. Maybe not you and I think agree on this when it comes to the money, but when it comes to like lifestyle, just by what you said right now about how you can just go out there and sit down without even thinking about it, I'm the complete opposite. I
Mhm.
read, I learn, and I become habitual of the control. So you mentioned briefly your morning routine. I'll share mine over I would say recent months. So I will wake up and the first thing I'll do is drink a glass of water. Hydration is huge. So just for general people listening to this, first thing you should do when you wake up, drink water. One of the best things, or if you can, drink some water with electrolytes just to get your system going. So what I'll do, drink a glass of water. I'll meditate, and then I'll go for a walk, because really in Houston, we're getting to the summer month. We're in the summer months now, that the really only time to go for a pleasant walk is before 6 a.m. So I'll take the dog on a walk. I also use this thing called a ruck. So it's RUCK. It's like a weighted pack. It's on your back instead of a weighted vest. And so I'll wear that on my pack at maybe 35 pounds on my back while I walk the dog. I like it because I see sunlight, I can get daylight into my eyes, and then I have just this weight on my back that kind of just opens up my diaphragm, allows me to breathe a little bit better. So go on a 20-minute walk, come back. I will then do some morning stretches, and then have some food, eat a little bit. Then I'll take the other dog for a walk. I like to take walks after I eat. It helps with digestion. We'll talk about this a little bit more, maybe today or maybe in later episodes. And then after that, I'll sit down, check my phone, check some emails while I'm drinking my coffee, while I'm drinking my tea. But this routine that I have now, which covers probably the first couple hours of my morning, has been like ever shifting, right? I listen to podcasts, and then I listen to the Huberman Lab. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's this big guy on health. And so I listen to his podcast, and he'll say, first thing in the morning, get daylight in your eyes. Okay. Well, then I hear people say, well, first thing in the morning, you need to drink water. Well, first thing in the morning, morning you need to stretch. Well, first thing in the morning you need to do this. And with me, I take all these bits of information and I try to make the perfect routine. And then I hear someone like you, you tell me you just wake up and you just go outside and just sit over the water and have your coffee. And in reality, someone like you is probably more at peace during what you're doing than someone like me, despite all the optimization.
Now, the question is, if your routine is disrupted, and I know you travel a lot,
Yeah.
does that mess you up?
It does. It's like it throws, like, for example, if I have a travel day, like you mentioned, we're going to the airport and I need to be up early, and that all goes out the window because I have two options. I either wake up earlier to do my routine. So if I have to leave to the airport at 5, I would wake up at 3:30 to do my routine first and foremost, which I don't want to sacrifice my sleep. So then that just means I won't do my routine for that day. Part of the routine that I do is to adapt, is to create the sense of adaptability that if and when those days come along where I can't do my routine, well, it's okay because as long as I can do my routine on the days that I can, that's in my control, then that's all I can do. So it does affect me, but I'm getting better about it, about being able to say, hey, it's just one day, no big deal. It's like, for me, it's like taking a rest day from the gym. That's one of the hardest thing to do. I'm the complete opposite of what most people struggle to get into the gym. I struggle to get out of the gym because it's such you can call it an addiction, you can call it whatever you want, but it makes me whole. It makes me sane, right? That keeps me sane as well. So to answer your question, yes, it does mess with me a little bit.
It's funny because I almost feel like a lot of people are using excuses, right? To get out, right? But
Mhm.
you almost are the opposite where you need to be forgiving of yourself,
Right.
right? Because I think that mental discipline is a double-edged sword in a sense, right? Because you feel
Yep.
so guilty if you break your routine, but then when you do break it, you have to be able to forgive yourself, right? And kind of make the excuse that you need in order to say like, okay, this is like a rest day, like you were saying. And I
Well,
think a lot of the stuff that we do, we tend not to forgive ourselves. Like we're our harshest critic, of course. That's always how it is. And everything that we do, like that piece is huge. You're
mhm.
not mentally like resilient and be able to say like, no, that was okay. It was okay to make that mistake. It's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to understand, like taking a step back, what are routines for? I think most people listening, ourselves included, will say that there is value in having a routine because there is that sense of consistency. But what is the purpose of the routine? It's to allow us to be a little bit more grounded, to take time off for us. Because I know for me personally, and I know that I'm speaking for others here, if I don't set aside that hour before I start my day, I'm never going to stop because once I get this ball rolling, it's not going to stop. I know that about myself. And my brain just keeps going and going. So if I can delay the onset of the information coming in, the stimulus coming in, and just force myself to be present, be via meditation. And when I say I go on a walk, I'm not having my phone. It's just me and my thoughts. You mentioned you've gone on walks before like that. I think those are the most impactful walks. I think doing that will allow us to develop some clarity, but we have to remind ourselves, okay, well, why are we doing this? And the whole point of it is to bring us more joy and bring us more happiness. But if you're stressing about optimizing your routine, you're actually doing the thing that you're trying to avoid, which is creating stress. Something that, and I think a lot of listeners will resonate with this, something that I've mentioned in one of our previous shows, a quote that I like is the world is divided into two types of people, those who don't know how to make money and those who don't know when to stop. And similarly, the second to that is, well, the world is divided into two people, those who don't know how to improve their lives and those who don't know when to stop. And those key personalities, they go hand in hand. If you're obsessed or if you have this vision of wanting to make more money or personal development, personal growth, well, with money and with personal growth, there's never really an end point. There's never really an end goal, right? There's not. In school, when you take a test, the highest grade you can get is an A plus. In life, in finances, in personal growth, the highest grade is, you mentioned on our last show about, if money wise, you could be Elon Musk. You could make all the money, literally have all the money in the world if you want, but that's a barometer that it's very difficult to achieve. So I think with all of that, it's about health. It's not just physical health, right? It's mental health. You talked about building resilience. You mentioned how the things that you like to do, I like to share my routine as well. So what do you think when times are tough and you have your routine, you have the things you like to do? What do you focus on when you're overwhelmed, when you're stressed, when things are out of your control? What's kind of your go-to things that you like to do?
For me, is about the routine piece doesn't bring me I think compared to you, right? You're the opposite of me. Like that kind of grounds you. My routine is just what I do. I don't even know, like I'm not even consciously about doing those things. It's a habit, right? For me.
Mhm.
But when things are tough, I think that's when I kind of go more inwards and I focus on more like my relationship relationship with my, and my close friend, because those are things that I feel like I will go back and invest more into it, because I need their, it's selfish in a sense, right? I know I'm going to need them. I need them
Yeah,
to
I
be
understand.
there for me, right? And when things are going well, it's easy to just kind of like brush them aside, not brush them aside, but to kind of not focus on that relationship as much, because things are great. I'm on a roll, and don't be in my way. That's kind of how I operate. But
Sure.
then when things are slowing down, or when I'm hitting a challenge that like I'm having to struggle more, that's when I turn more like, hey, I think like I need to refocus more internally,
Hmm.
and spend more time not focusing on outside stuff, and focus more on like my own relationship with those that are closest to me, because I know that they're the foundation for me to get through whatever that's to
Yep.
come, because I can't control what's going to come my way.
Sure.
That I've learned,
For
a long
sure.
time ago. I worry, but I'm not a worry ward, because at a certain point you just realize I can't think about this anymore, because there's so many factors out there that until something happens, I can't react anymore, right? I can't be
Hmm.
always proactively. What if there's a million of what ifs that could happen, and none of them actually will be the actual thing that happens, right?
Sure.
So you learn to kind of not do too much of that, but then focus on the stuff that you are able to control, right?
Yep.
Spending more time with my daughter, or helping her with more her assignment, and just more refocusing of that time, I think helps prepare for whatever, because that way in that time that you spend with them, you're communicating a little bit more about what's the internal struggles of what's going on, so that you don't just come off like a mad person, like
Hmm.
why are you so angry.
No, I think that's a good way to put it. I think I've never really seen it that way. I tend to see it actually maybe not the opposite, but when things are going well, and I think that this is kind of a piece of advice that I like to give to people. When things are going well, that's when you need to work on things and to prepare yourself for when things go bad. For example, hurricane fresh on our mind, the amount of people that were lined up at the gas station to get gas during the power outage. For that is get gas the day before. So we did, right? If even if you realize the hurricane's not as bad as you thought it was going to be, well, so what? You just topped off on your fuel tank. What's wrong with that? As opposed to waiting to see if something was actually going to happen and then reacting to that. So something that I think is important is when you're healthy and everything's going well, things are pretty stable. That's when you start developing, maybe you can call it a routine or not, but working and developing on the things that will make you and keep you healthy. And what you're talking about is emotional health, right? It's strengthening your relationships, with your family, so that when the times are tough, well, you've already built up a lot of this equity in the relationship that you can then lean on that when you can't lean on anything else. I think that is very important. And for me, part of that also is fitness, something that I can rely on, that if things are going wrong and the gyms are closed, and I have my own home gym, but even if you don't, like, your physical body can take you places. If you need to go on a run to release stress, go on a walk, do some body weight exercises, you don't need equipment. That will, if you build up that kind of dopamine tolerance where you get these good hormones when you're working out, then you can relate to that. And then in times of tough goings, you can then step aside and say, I need to take a 30-minute break to just work out. Same thing with meditating, same thing with all these extra things. I think it's important to try, while I get like, I'm very hard on myself about not optimizing to its fullest. When times are tough, I value the fact that I have a toolbox, if you will, of things to turn to when I'm stressed, that it can potentially calm me down. And if this thing doesn't work, well, I know that I've tried other things as well, such as meditating, such as walking, such as yoga, working out. There's going to the sauna. There's a bunch of different things that I enjoy that also keep me healthy, right? And then that's where I think sometimes maybe people turn to vices, alcohol, smoking, those types of things, because that gives them some semblance of control, right?
Yeah, but I think that's great advice, and we all have to deal with, right, these internal or external struggles differently, and however like makes sense. But it's always good to hear how other people do it, because
Yeah.
you're gonna, right, like you were saying, how your routine was built from hearing about all these different tips and
Yeah.
whatnot, and you create your own, right? And that's pretty much how we operate as well, right? Like listening to you help me kind of moderate or change some of the stuff that I thought was like going. That's how I always handle things, right? It always be
Yeah.
just, okay, well, maybe I need to tweak and change, right? So that's why it's so important, like we talked about, like to, when we talk about investing, like don't invest in a vacuum, right? You don't want to be the lone ranger when it comes to that. And same thing, I think, with fitness, with mental health, like the whole, like, I don't need anybody else's advice, so I can handle this myself. I think that's a dangerous road to be on.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think you and I can speak from experience on that, because I had that mindset myself going into the early days of my dietitian career, because it was very difficult for me to connect and relate to people at at my own age. And I figured, okay, well, they're doing this. Let me just head down and grind. And there is, our society kind of glorifies the work ethic, right? We glorify this work 18-hour days, burn the midnight oil. Like we glorify these things. And when we look at people who work hard, we deem that to be, those are the most successful people. And therefore, those are the happiest. But in reality, that's not always the case. And that's where I think it's important to understand why you're doing what you're doing. That's not to say that you can't have a 6-month period where you're thinking, you know what, I'm gonna buckle down right now, tell family, you tell friends, look, I have this vision, I have this focus, I need to do this for 6 months. But then you come out of that and then you have your people there, instead of just saying, you know, my whole life is going to be face down and grinding, because then you'll wake up one day and you won't have the things that genuinely make you happy, be it family, be it friends, be it your health, mentally and physically. And I think the sooner you can start working on that, that's why I say working on it in times of good, then when things, inevitably things will happen in your life, be it in your financial world, you might get injured mentally, you might have things going on, you'll have things to turn to. And that's where I think big part of it is taking care of yourself, specifically from an emotional standpoint, is so big, so that when things come up, you're ready to go.
So what's that conversation like to yourself, to kind of keep you, like we were saying, we were kind of talking a little bit before we started recording, was how, on this journey of being an investor and kind of doing things opposite of what the mainstream teaches us, right? We're not just sitting here putting, 5% of our income into a 401k and hope and pray for the best. We actually took control, right, of our money, and we went on a journey to become active investors who are focused on doing a lot of this ourselves, not professionally. I mean, there's not even a school to teach you how to become a
Not
professional
yet. Stay tuned.
investor, right?
Yeah.
It's been such a journey to kind of learn all this on our own, and kind of just kind of skim information off all different sources of mentorship programs and people who's done it and whatnot. Like, that journey is not full of puppies and rainbows and unicorns,
Mhm.
right? There's things on that road to success that are difficult, challenging, setbacks that you encounter. Some of them are heartbreaking, right? Like, it's just like you have put all your hopes and dream into this project and work so hard and it just falls apart.
Yep.
Not your own fault or whatever, something, maybe a partnership doesn't work out, and those things are difficult to handle. So what is that conversation like with yourself to kind of overcome that? You have two voices, where one is saying like, give up, like just go back to your old ways of life, and then that other voice that has to come through to kind of overcome that. What is that conversation like for you?
So I'll give two answers. I'll give what my brain does or did and what I'm actively working on. And I'll give the answer of what I think should be done. So with me and with my experience, it's been there, like there's like this sense of motivation that I almost have to use a sort of anger, or maybe anger is not the best word, like rage, this sense of like people are against me or I'm my own person, nobody understands me, as a source of fuel to get to my success point. And that's always been the case since I was young. I always stood out for one reason or another, being my height, being my soccer shoes I used to wear as a kid, whatever it was, I always stood out. And therefore I knew that people wouldn't always agree with that. And that would fuel me. And that always kind of let me go forward, because I was always motivated to, you've mentioned this before with yourself, being resilient and almost prove people wrong. All right, cool. That gets you to a certain point. But then when you start, that voice in your brain that has told you, that has almost talked down to you, that said, you're not good enough, you need to fix this, you need to work on yourself. And whenever you start having doubts about yourself, that person back your mind says, I told you you weren't going to make it. And that voice is the voice of all these other people that you've built up in your mind, right? The thing is, that's great. That can be a great source of fuel if you know how to tame it. And herein lies the problem. If you don't know how to tame that, and you get to a point where you and others deem you successful, yet you still wake up and there's this voice in your mind that says you're lazy, you can't, even when you're on vacation, even after you spent years building up this empire, this cash flow, this reserves of money to then allow you to live the life you want to live, be it on a vacation or doing whatever you genuinely enjoy, then you do that. And the moment you're sitting there, that voice isn't going away, because you've never faced that voice. You've never tamed that voice. That's what happened with me. So now I'm in the stages of actively working on, that's why there's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of introspection, a lot of reading, a lot of communicating with people to learn how do I have a healthy relationship with this voice. I think a big part, now going into the second answer, I think a big part of why that happened was because there was never a why. There was never, for me, and I think this is so important for people to have a why, because if you are going on this journey, whatever the journey means to you, and you're always always going to have this voice with you, and you determine initially how that voice speaks to you, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. And the more and more you fuel those negative thoughts, the more and more the negativity is going to come in. But the more and more you fuel those positive thoughts, the more the positivity will come in. So I think step one is, we've always said this in almost every episode, identifying your why. And when you're in a tough time and you ask yourself, man, what's wrong with me? Like, what's going on? That voice will tell you, well, here's what you need to do. Because your why, you're doing this, let's say, as an example, for your family. You're trying to retire your wife, your husband, your kid. You want your kids to grow up in a successful way, whatever it is. That's your why. Okay, well, then the problem you're facing, you don't have another choice but to pivot and address that situation. But if you don't have a why, then that part of your brain will just continue to hound at you and just say, figure it out, figure it out. But deep down, you don't know why you're figuring it out. You just know, well, this is all I'm supposed to do. And again, that might take that person, such as myself, to a more successful place than the other person. And when I say successful, I mean as deemed by the outside world. But internally, it is a battle. And that's a battle that I don't think people really want to face. People oftentimes see the successful people out there and think, oh my God, I want their life. And the answer is you don't. You know, I heard Musk talk about this before on an interview where he said, people always talk about wanting to be me. You do not want to be me. I mean, Musk sleeps in his office most of the time, like literally in his office to go to work. You don't want that. You want the success that you think goes associated with that, but you don't want everything else that goes on. You can't just pick and choose. So instead of idolizing these people who you deem to be successful, who are in reality just workaholics and don't know how to balance their lives, look to something or somebody that has a better balance of what it is that you want after you've identified your why. Then you can communicate that with yourself. And when you struggle, when you're going through the inevitable challenges, that will keep you motivated.
Yeah, well said. I think that's, what keeps us coming back for more in a sense, right? Otherwise, when things get tough, it's easier to just say like, forget this. Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing this for? Right.
Right.
Even if for those people who, especially for like someone like me who's a serial entrepreneur, like for me, it's that shiny object syndrome, right? Ooh, maybe this business is going to be the one, right? Or ooh, maybe
Yeah.
that next thing is going to be the one to change my life or whatever. It's without that kind of anchor, right? Like, hey, this new project that I started, right? Well, whatnot. I have to make it work. Why? Well, because I'm trying to do better. Why do you need to do better? Right? You had to really deep down. If you can't answer those tough questions, like our recent project that we're doing together right now, like we each have different why, right? Like for me, I asked myself that question a lot, right? I'm like, why did I come out of retirement for this? Why, where, I was enjoying my life living on passive income and not having to worry about all these. Why did I want to come out and step out and get back onto Monday morning work calls and, completely self-inflicted.
I'm laughing because, man, I can relate to that
You
so
know what
much.
I'm talking about,
I know
right?
exactly what you
Like,
mean.
wait a second.
Yeah.
Why did I do this to myself, right?
Why is my boss calling me Monday morning? Oh, wait, that's me.
I'm now the one calling the Monday morning meetings when I'm just like, wait a second. I worked so hard to get out of Monday morning.
Oh my goodness.
What am I
That is
doing?
so funny.
But it's just funny because I'm like, you know what? Because my why to do that is so important
Yeah.
that I can't stop, right? I can't stop until I see this project through and that it has reached the point where it's stabilized, it's strong enough that I now then can hand it over to someone else that's more capable than me. And I totally recognize that, right? Where my strength is in the ideas generation, is in the problem solving piece of any endeavor. But for me, my weakness or my area of improvement is the follow through, like the long term, right? So I need to overcome a lot of that to make sure that I see this project from beginning to end and have a exit strategy that makes sense for all that's involved. So it might be, maybe I took on more than I can, swallow or whatever. I chew more than I can swallow, what bit off more than I can chew or something like that. But because my why is so strong right now that I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that this doesn't fail. What I'm referring
I know
to.
exactly what you mean. You mentioned something that I want people to think about, the thought experiment. I mentioned this about in the 4,000 week book about people going to to start off why you get into investing, right? Why we get into making more money. And the cop out answer is more money will make my life easier. But that has to be specified into how is it going to make your life easier? What specifically? We have a mutual friend who on our community funny chat. I remember reading this the other day, who had said, oh my goodness, I finally hired a gardener, right, to help
Mhm.
with taking care of the lawn, because that was something that I was doing out of my own pocket, like myself. I was trading my time to do that. Whereas now I'm paying somebody, maybe I made a little bit more passive income to pay my gardener. And that freed up their time to do whatever they want, spend more time with their family, whatever it is. But we get into this to make more money, not necessarily understanding how much and how specifically that's going to change our lives. You mentioned, as a serial entrepreneur, hoping to find that business or that product or that thing that's going to change your life, right? And something that a thought experiment that I want people to do is write down, to think about, you win the lottery today. You've won $10 million. Let's say five. You won $5 million. What do the next 5 years of your life look like with those $5 million? First of all, what do you do with that money right away? What are you paying off? What are you buying? Where are you putting it? How are you investing it? How are you saving it? Where are you donating it to? Ask all of these questions. Go through the whole thought process. Sit down visually, like see yourself visually with the benefits of that $5 million. Okay. Now flash forward 5 years and think and put yourself in that position. Are you genuinely happier than you are right now with that $5 million? And that's most people, if they're not doing the experiment correctly, will, without even thinking in 30 seconds, say yes. And some people probably after 30 minutes of thinking will still say yes, but there'll be these thoughts that they never thought about. Oh, I didn't know I would still have this problem. I didn't know I would still feel this way. That's why if you look at the statistics about the people, the lottery winners, how much of them are broke again within 5 years, it's astonishing when
Right.
you realize that. It's astonishing when you realize.
Sometimes a windfall, it could be a curse rather than a
Yeah.
blessing, right? Was it which one of the family? I always forget. Rockefeller? No, Vanderbilt. One of the,
Yeah.
family where like the kids, I read this book and I forgot about the name already. Like where the kids actually who receive all the windfall from the family trust or whatever, that became a curse for them because
Mhm.
none of them became, successful in the end because of that. We talk about, oh, we want to create generational wealth and whatever. That is actually one of my biggest fear is, am
Yeah.
I just going to create waiters? You know what they are, right? Those people that you just create people who are waiting for you to die. Like,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to
Yeah.
create that for my next generation. So that's like a whole other topic of conversation to have. Like,
Yep.
how do we guard against that? How do we build guardrails,
Right.
to have that? Because it's one thing that we spend all our time in this generation, in this our lifetime, to build up something that's tremendous, something that we're self-driven and we're doing all that. But then like, okay, we're here for this one lifetime, but we are, no matter what, we're all leaving a legacy, right? And the legacy doesn't have to be money, but it could be the work ethics that you're leaving behind to the people who are later on listening to this podcast. This is legacy, right? All these information that you're sharing or we're sharing right now, that's going to be kind of out there available for other people to tap into, right? It's
Mhm.
almost like we're taking our brain out and putting it on display,
Yeah.
right? And that part for me is a big part of my why.
Mhm.
Like I need to get this out so that it can serve as a starting point for someone to think about what they want to do, or it could be a warning against.
Yeah.
Right. So it could serve multiple purposes, but that's why this podcast is important that, we're dedicating a lot of time to do this. And then also, the other project that we're involved in, those are important, kind of top of my mind things because our time's limited, right? And,
Yeah.
and a storm could take us out as we've learned. So
Amen.
we
Yeah.
need to
And
put this out.
no, and that's so true. And I like concrete items. I like action items for people. I like people to have that. And we started talking about with routines, right? And I still, it takes a lot of reflecting. And I hate that. I used to hate this answer so much, like diet answers. I would ask somebody, an expert in nutrition, hey, what's the best way to burn body fat? And they would always answer with, it depends. It depends. And I would like, just give me the answer, right? Because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants the answer. And now I've turned into the it depends person, where I don't want this show and this podcast to be a blanket statement of do this, do that, do this, do that. Because I'm telling you right now, if you listen to shows that tell you that, they're lying because it's so individualized.
Mm.
It's so individualized. The information we give is general, is vague, and it is that way for a reason. Because how I learn and how I think is a very beneficial way to learn is absorb information. Listen to this podcast, read another book, listen to another podcast, listen to another show, and take all these tidbits that you get and compile them in your brain. Be with yourself, sit down with yourself and think, all right, try them out and see what genuinely works for me. That's how I talked about building your routine. It's the same way of like building your own brain and building your own lifestyle, building your own personal growth journey. That's the kind of the best way to do it and see what works. As I mentioned with different ways to kind of enhance your mental health and feel better. Walking. I think going on a walk, you've mentioned this multiple times, Pei, when you were kind of figuring out your journey, you and Mike would take walks. I think taking a walk by yourself or with a dog, no phone, no nothing, no podcast, no headphones, just walk. walk. Meditating, I think, is beneficial. I firmly am a big believer in meditating. If you can, meditating is very helpful. Working out, that could be walking, but that could be weight training, that could be going on a run, riding the bike, gym, not gym, some form of physical activity, I think is a huge thing to do. Food, find good foods that fuel you. I'm going to take a kind of sidestep here. Most people will know that certain foods that you eat, you'll feel better after you eat those foods, and you'll feel worse after eating other ones. People will say, no, it's not true. It is. Like, genuinely sit down, no phone, don't mindlessly eat. Sit down and eat a McDonald's meal. See how you feel both physically and emotionally after you eat that meal, and then make some food at home with your family, some spaghetti, a steak, salmon, whatever it is. Make it a nice healthy dish and see how you feel 30 minutes after that. I love that exercise because scientifically we can prove there's a link between what we eat and our hormones in our brain. But beyond all that, it's how people feel. So eating healthy, I think, has a huge impact. I think focus on one or two key areas that you want to work on. We can all improve. All of us can improve. And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're looking at improving you're looking at probably making passive income or becoming healthier with that umbrella goal of just being overall happier, healthier, having a better quality of life. So take one or two of those kind of concepts, topics, and see what you want to work on, see what you think is going to help, so that when the times come that are both good and bad, but specifically when the bad times come, and they will, you'll have something to hold on to. And hopefully throughout the journey, because the journey is what it's all about. It's not about the end destination. It is about the journey. But throughout that journey, you'll find things that you'll actually genuinely look forward to. Maybe you pick up a meditation practice and you really see like, wow, I really like meditating. That's what happened with me. It's like, oh, really fun. So I think that those are some great action items that people can take to overall improve and hopefully have a positive impact in their life and build resilience, like you mentioned.
So this is where I think the powerful part about our podcast is going to come in, especially later on, because I'm going to do a little review or like a little forecast for us. We're actually inviting others, right, to come in and talk about, because this show is not just about us. Because one thing that I wish I had more of as I over the last year started on this investment journey is I wish more people would have been open and talked about their thought process, their journey openly, and not in a formal TV like fake, like staged way, of that conversation. I wish there was more of that out there. It's almost like I may not be able to meet, very successful business person, but I would love to kind of get in their brain and hear more about their not just their how they become successful, but
Right,
also
right.
how they handle the other side of success, right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more, other entrepreneurs, other like-minded investors, or even people who are, just in the beginning of their journey, because I love to see the transformation of that. Like even ourselves, like even the two of us, we are changing as we go, and we're sharing that as we go as well. Nothing's rehearsed, it's not scripted. Whatever comes to our head, we just talk. But I think there's not enough of that conversation out there.
Yeah. No, I love it. And, I've told you this before, and I've told the audience this, that we're doing this also for selfish reasons, because regardless, and I'd like to tell people this because then people can see what we're thinking. Regardless, if we were doing this as a podcast or not, you and I already had these conversations, and we would continue to have these conversations, because to me, that's what a good friendship is about. To me, a good friendship is having these deeper conversations, again, when things are going good and when things are going bad, because that builds, it builds a friendship with somebody else, which is great. But B, it allows you to reflect internally and think, man, I didn't think about it this way, or this person has this experience, or this person pitched it a different way. That's why I love our conversations. And so I want people to keep that in mind as we're going along. And the people we'll have on we're not only going to have quote unquote expert guests on these topics. You're going to hear people who are in the early stages, who are more than likely where you're currently at right now, or maybe one step behind or one step ahead. But it shows you the realization, the struggles that they're going through, the challenges, the success that they're having. You can see that, and you'll see that with us. And Pei mentioned earlier in the show about seeing into our brains and seeing literally what we're thinking. And every show that I end it with, I like to show like this is raw. This is who we are. This is what we're about. Because I think the more open we can be, the better it is for people. So definitely thank you everybody for joining us on this journey in general, right? If you're on this episode now, you've kind of gone through a few of our episodes and a couple of guests that we've had on, and hopefully this is only the beginning. But hey, do you have anything else you want to include with?
Yeah, I think this is like, even for me, having this new thing that's developed, this conversation with you on a consistent basis. Because before this podcast, we were talking often, but not on a consistent basis. But now that has become like a routine. At first, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was going to be like a chore, but now I'm like, this is what I've been looking for all this time. So I'm grateful for that and
Yeah.
change in myself, right? Because at first I was like, oh, how am I gonna talk to this guy for so long? So what is there to talk about? But turns
Right.
out
What can we talk about for so long?
right. It turns out that we actually, we have a lot of differences. We have a lot of things in
Yeah.
common, but it's just that asking those questions. I love to, learn more about, how you think about things because it kind of either it mirrors me or kind of, changes how I think as well. So I think that's fantastic. And now that we have people that are, agreeing to come on the show as
Yeah.
guests, I'm super excited because I just want to expand this more. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I want to encourage people as well. If you feel like if you're listening to this and you feel like you have something to add a value, reach out to us. Or if there's something you want us to discuss, if there's a topic that you're curious about, I wonder how Pei does this, or wonder how Nino thinks about that. We love to just discuss it more. I think as we've got everything started, as we've got this going, I think we're gonna have a lot more, like we mentioned, guests on, talk more about kind of the fitness journeys. I know there might be some people frustrated. Why aren't they giving me concrete advice? Why can't they tell me what to eat and how to eat and where to invest and where to put my money? As I mentioned, we're here. We're not legal or financial advisors. Yes, I'm a dietitian, but I'm not working one-on-one with every single person here. So we want to make sure we're giving the general advice, but we also want to make sure people are getting valuable information from this. So please feel free. Pei and I, what you hear on these podcasts are who we are. And if you ever reach out to us, we can ever meet you in person or over the phone or over a Zoom, you'll see this is exactly who we are as well. And so we love to meet people, get different ideas, get different concepts. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in. This has been another fun one. Please stay tuned for the next episode. Take care.
Bye.